which was more impressive, the offensive effort or the defensive effort? Do you just say a tie because they so commanded presence on both sides of the ball that it wasn't even a fair fight? And a good victory Monday morning, Eagles fans. Appreciate you streaming in early with us here on Birds 365, the home of just one of only two undefeated teams at 3-0 in the National Football League. Yeah, the Giants are 2-0. We'll find out if they can get to 3-0 tonight. But we're here to talk about the beatdown that was the Eagles and the Commanders yesterday in Washington. And John McMullen had a front row seat. Well, not exactly front row. You're kind of off to the side down in the end zone.
In the end zone. Yeah, it was front row. Was front row in FedEx, though, the FedEx press box. But, whew, yeah.
Yeah.
Not the greatest. Nothing nice to say. Yeah, don't say it.
Oh, no. We can take shots.
I know. I'm
joking. Of a stadium anytime we want. And it was a dumpster fire for the Commanders yesterday. And the individuals lighting that fire were the Philadelphia Eagles on both offense and defense. For the second consecutive game, John, the Eagles have been dominant on both sides of the football. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about the O or the D. Watching yesterday's game, I had a tough time determining in my own mind which was more impressive, the offensive effort or the defensive effort. Do you just say a tie because they so commanded presence on both sides of the ball that it wasn't even a fair fight?
I would give a slight edge to the defense for this reason. I think the offense was a short, explosive burst in the second quarter. 24 points. And obviously a lot of that had to do, they were down at the end of the first quarter, the big Devonta Smith reception, toe tap, which I'm told he wasn't in, but you can't tell at FedEx Field because they don't have TVs that work that show you the replay. But nonetheless, I'm told it was probably not a catch. I don't know. You probably know better than me, Jody.
I would say that had they gone to review, there's a good chance they overturn it.
Yeah, but that's, I give the Eagles credit. I gave him credit for, hey, hurrying up, get that snap off. Ron Rivera doesn't get the information. Whatever happened from Washington's standpoint is not the concern of the Eagles. So It counts. It was a phenomenal catch, whether it was legal or not. And that, the explosion started from there. They scored 24 points. You had the short field on the forced fumble as well, which essentially sealed the game. Went from 3-0 to 10-0. The game was over at that point. So the defense was more consistent throughout. That's why I'd give them a slight advantage. The 9 sacks, great game plan. They know Carson Wentz better than anybody. Even though this coaching staff wasn't here, they have all the intel that they could ever need about the players that were here. But the vast majority of them, like Carson Wentz, it was big hug fest pregame. Carson hugging, even with Howie Roseman, little bro hug between those two. Fletcher Cox loves Carson. Jason Kelsey loves him. Did the jersey swap after the game. Dallas Goedert, Lane Johnson. But they also know Carson. And, take away that first read, he's going to hold on to the football. It's exactly what happened. 9 sacks later, 2 forced fumbles. Just a dominating performance from the defense and the defensive line, because it was, for the most part, 4-man rush, and they were getting home. And they took advantage. Look, I always say a lot of fans don't look at the opponent. So, the nitpicking today is going to be at the running game. Well, Jonathan Allen's really stinking good. Daron Payne's really stinking. And by the way, Nick Sirianni talked about that after game, but he talked about it all week behind the scenes, how good they were. I think Jonathan Allen would be a superstar in this league if he played on a good team. I think people would start to realize how good he was. In the first couple of games, they faced difficult tackles, so they were having trouble with the edge rush because they were playing good players. Here you have a backup center who was a disaster. You had Sam Cosmi, who was terrible, and bang, they take advantage of it. And that's what I love the most about this team, about Nick Sirianni. Wild Goose, Rashad Wild Goose was William
Oof.
Jackson wasn't able to play. They knew that. They went right at him. They got 2 big PIs. They always talk about explosive plays. They count from the Eagles' standpoint. When you get those big chunk plays on PIs, they take advantage of the weakness of the other team. To me, that defines good coaching. So I give a lot of credit to the coaching staff as well. Just a dominant performance. The offense is just, it's so difficult to stop because they can do everything. They can do everything. AJ Brown is ridiculously good. Ridiculously good. I graded him as the second best player coming into the season when I did my top 25. I may have undersold him, except that Dallas Goedert is that good as well at tight end. He's an amazing player. I saw a personnel guy on Twitter say he's the best player in football, Dallas Goedert. That's what he said. I'm not going that far. But that's how good he is at his position. His position isn't as important as a lot of other positions, let's be honest. But, Devonta Smith has that game. He's the second wide receiver. The second wide receiver on this team. Then you have the +1 impact of Jalen Hurts in the running game. It's so well-rounded. And look, it's still early. It's still a short sample size. You can only play who's in front of you. Everybody's talking about Jonathan Gannon, whether it's good or bad. You better start talking about Shane Steichen because he's not going to be here if they keep playing like this.
That's a very good point. And I was going to hold off on this point, but because you went the direction that you went, I feel the need to follow up. As good as the Eagles' offense is, and you just ran it down for us, arguably the best offensive line, a tight end who some people are calling the best player in football, the perfect wide receiver in A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. Yeah, where are the doubters? Where are those who I had to fend off when the Eagles moved up to? He's 165 pounds, sopping wet with a rock in his pocket. How can you expect him to play in the National Football League with that frame? Well, Skinny Batman came out yesterday and showed everyone why he is one of the best players in the National Football League and will be for years to come. Where are all those doubters today? They're in hiding. Jalen Hurts, not only throwing the ball, throwing it with accuracy, throwing it down the field, throwing it short, making all the throws, all the plays. How do they not score any points in the second half?
Yeah, I mean, I think they took the foot off the gas again. Nick Sirianni says they didn't. He took, blame for that against Minnesota. He said he felt they stayed aggressive. Look, I don't think they did. But even if they did, a lot of it's human nature. The game's over. You're trying to get the heck out of there with no injuries. You're not threatened. And there is a human nature aspect to that. People can say, well, you got to keep going. You got to keep going. I mean, if you won, you won. And you just start to relax a little bit. It is the definition of human nature. I think that's what happens. So, I mean, yeah, you could nitpick at it. I think if they were threatened, similar, I said the same thing against Minnesota. I saw no evidence that if they were going to be threatened. And I think if Minnesota cashed in on the blocked field goal, or Herb Smith didn't drop that pass, or, they took advantage of the interception. If any of those things would have happened, I think the Eagles would have turned it back on and just went right down the field and scored, or, maybe not immediately, but certainly in the game. Same thing here. I think if they were threatened at any point, they would have handled their business. Can't prove it, but that's the feel I get in the game. They're not threatened. That's why I'm not concerned. I think it's more human nature than anything else, because when they're going at it full blast, it looks pretty good.
Yeah, unbelievable dominance that they've had all 3 games in the second quarter. That seems to be their quarter, because they always win a flip and get deferral in the first quarter. So they don't score as many points in the first quarter as they do in the second. They're the most dominant second quarter team in the National Football League. But they do have to be able to put points on the board all 4 quarters. It hasn't been necessary here in the first 3 games, and we'll find at some point, they're not going to run wire to wire in every single game they play this year and go 17-0 in the regular season. So at some point, we'll find out if they're capable of doing it or if there really truly is an issue. But I do want to tackle the issue that you kind of touched on for a second there. And that's the fact that the Eagles got 9 sacks. 9. Count them, 9. 8 of which came from the defensive line. Your guy, TJ Edwards, got the other one, but a couple of shared sacks in there. They were just stone cold dominant. And you're right. They took advantage of a weakened Commanders offensive line. But a lot of it had to do with Carson Wentz. For those who were Carson Wentz fans and felt he never should have been moved on from and that he was the guy because they made a contract commitment to him that they should have kept the commitment they had. No, they needed to give up the commitment because Carson gave up the commitment to the Eagles. And he's the same old quarterback we remember from 2020.
Yeah.
He holds on to the football and just waits and waits and waits. And he's not playing. He's got to know that. John McMullen knew it. Jody McDonald knew it. The Philadelphia Eagles defensive line knew it. Carson, your offensive line wasn't very good. And after you get sacked, I don't know, the second time, the third time, the fourth time, or the 5th time, maybe it should dawn on you that you got to get the football out of there. The offensive coordinator of the Redskins, what the hell are you doing continuing to call 7-step drops? The Eagles are having a picnic back there in your backyard. Everybody meet up at Carson Wentz and take him to the ground. And they just kept calling the same play. Are they that limited that they can't, adjust during the game and going, oh, my God, we're getting crushed back here. I think we should do something else? What the heck was Washington thinking?
Yeah, they're not limited. I think, the best play of Washington's probably offense was the first offensive play of the game. They did sort of the end around to Curtis Samuel, who's a really dynamic player and is back and healthy, and they got 15 yards, and then it all went downhill from there. They have Terry McLaurin, who they didn't get the football to until, there was 30 minutes of garbage time. This is a perfect example of why I'm not a stat guy when it comes to the NFL. I talk about this all the time with you, Jody. I'm a stat guy in baseball. Large sample sizes. I think everything turns out the way it should for the most part in baseball. It's a very analytic, very stats-based game. Football, you only play 17 games in the and then so the sample size as a whole is very small. Because of the unbalanced schedule, because there's 32 teams and everybody doesn't play everybody, that factors into it. But even more so, the context of the game factors in it. Like those last 30 minutes, I don't give a flying you know what. I mean, the Commanders had 50 yards, I think, at halftime. So I look at that first half stats and I go, that's where the game is won. That's the important part. And that's where the Eagles dominated. And then Carson, he did the same thing against, I think, Detroit. He had a terrible start. They got way behind. And then he put up some numbers in garbage time. And then they made it look a little bit better in that game than this game. But, first half, all right, Carson, 3 of 10, 24 yards, 39.6 passer rating. That's where the game was won and lost. So I don't care about the final box score. They dominated the Washington Commanders when it mattered. And from their standpoint, 322, Jody, 322 to 50. They had 322 offensive yards in the first half. That's complete domination. And you can throw the second half in the trash because I don't care at that point. Human nature takes over. 30 minutes of extended garbage time.
It was extended tiempo de garbage for the Eagles in their victory over the Washington Commanders yesterday. All right, we've still got an hour and 40 minutes to chop up the Eagles win and 3-0 start. Only they and the Dolphins at 3-0, 3 weeks into the season. I'd say they're in a good position. But look who's coming to town, Dougie P. No, we got all week to talk about that. So we'll put Dougie P on the side. We want to bask in the glow of the domination yesterday. We're going to have assistance. Up next is our buddy Tommy Lawler from Eagles Blitz. That's IGGLES, eaglesblitz.com. It's been following the Eagles for years. I'm guessing yesterday put a smile on his face because he goes back to the Buddy Ryan defensive line dominating days, and that's what it looked like yesterday for the Birds. So Tommy Lawler from eaglesblitz.com, our first guest. He's up next here on Birds 365.